a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. George Soros. George Soros, Hun, is a Hungarian-American investor, business magnate, philanthropist, political activist and author. Soros is one of the world's most successful investors. As of February 2018, Soros had a net worth of $8 billion, after donating $18 billion to his philanthropic agency, Open Society Foundations. Born in Budapest, he survived Nazi Germany-occupied Hungary and emigrated to England in 1947. He attended the London School of Economics, graduating with a bachelor's and eventually a master's in philosophy. He began his business career by taking various jobs at merchant banks in England and then the United States, before starting his first hedge fund, Double Eagle, in 1969. Profits from his first fund furnished the seed money to start Soros Fund Management, his second hedge fund, in 1970. Double Eagle was renamed the Quantum Fund and was the principal firm Soros advised. At its founding, the Quantum Fund had $12 million in assets under management, and as of 2011 it had $25 billion, the majority of his overall net worth. He is known as the man who broke the Bank of England, because of his short sale of worth of pounds sterling, making him a profit of $1 billion during the 1992 Black Wednesday UK currency crisis. His early studies of philosophy led him to develop and apply Karl Popper's general theory of reflexivity to capital markets, which he claims renders him a clear picture of asset bubbles and fundamental/market value of securities, as well as value discrepancies used for shorting and swapping stocks. He is a well-known supporter of American progressive and American liberal political causes and dispenses his donations through his foundation, the Open Society Foundations. Between 1979 and 2011, Soros donated more than $11 billion to various philanthropic causes. By 2017, his donations, on civil initiatives to reduce poverty and increase transparency, and on scholarships and universities around the world, total $12 billion. He influenced the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe in the late 1980s and early 1990s. And provided one of Europe's largest higher education endowments to the Central European University in his Hungarian hometown. His extensive funding of political causes has made him a bugaboo of European nationalists. Early life and education. Soros was born in Budapest in the Kingdom of Hungary to a well-to-do non-observant Jewish family, who, like many upper-middle-class Hungarian Jews at the time, were uncomfortable with their roots. Soros has wryly described his home as a Jewish anti-Semitic home. His mother Elizabeth came from a family that owned a thriving silk shop. His father Tivadar was a lawyer and had been a prisoner of war during and after World War I until he escaped from Russia and rejoined his family in Budapest. The two married in 1924. Tivadar was an Esperantist writer and taught Soros to speak Esperanto in his childhood. In 1936, Soros family changed their name from the German Jewish Schwarz to Soros, as protective camouflage in increasingly anti-Semitic Hungary. Tivadar liked the new name, because it is a palindrome and, because of its meaning. In Hungarian, Soros means, next in line, or, designated successor. In Esperanto it means, Wilsor. Soros was 13 years old in March 1944, when Nazi Germany occupied Hungary. Jewish children were barred from attending school by the Nazis, and Soros and the other schoolchildren were made to report to the Judenrat, which had been established during the occupation. Soros later described this time to writer Michael Lewis. The Jewish Council asked the little kids to hand out the deportation notices. I was told to go to the Jewish Council, and there I was given these small slips of paper. I took this piece of paper to my father. He instantly recognized it. This was a list of Hungarian Jewish lawyers. He said, "You deliver the slips of paper, and tell the people that if they report they will be deported." Soros did not return to that job. His family purchased documents to say that they were Christians, thereby allowing them to survive the war. Later that year at age 14, Soros posed as the Christian godson of an official of the collaborationist Hungarian government's Ministry of Agriculture, who himself had a Jewish wife in hiding. On one occasion, rather than leave the 14-year-old alone, the official took Soros with him while he inventoried a rich Jewish family's estate, though Soros did not take part. Tivadar not only saved his immediate family, but also many other Hungarian Jews, and George would later write that 1944 had been the happiest year of his life, for it had given him the opportunity to witness his father's heroism. In 1945, Soros survived the siege of Budapest, in which Soviet and German forces fought house to house through the city. In 1947, Soros immigrated to England and became a student at the London School of Economics. While a student of the philosopher Karl Popper, Soros worked as a railway porter and as a waiter, and once received £40 from a Quaker charity. In a discussion at the Los Angeles World Affairs Council in 2006, Alvin Schuster, former foreign editor of the Los Angeles Times, asked Soros, "How does one go from an immigrant to a financier? When did you realize that you knew how to make money?" Soros replied, "Well, I had a variety of jobs, and I ended up selling fancy goods on the seaside, souvenir shops, and I thought, that's really not what I was cut out to do. So, I wrote to every managing director in every merchant bank in London, got just 1 or 2 replies, and eventually that's how I got a job in a merchant bank. That job was an entry-level position in Singer and Friedlander." Soros earned a Bachelor of Science in Philosophy in 1951, and a Master of Science in Philosophy in 1954, both from the London School of Economics. Early business experience. After graduating, Soros found it difficult to get work, and settled for a job as a traveling salesman for a fancy goods wholesaler selling to retailers in Welsh seaside resorts. He described this period as the low point of my life, and wrote letters to a number of merchant banks requesting interviews. Many of these ignored him, and others humiliated him in the interviews. He credits his acceptance at Singer and Friedlander to the fact that the managing director was a fellow Hungarian. Singer and Friedlander. In 1954, Soros began his financial career at the merchant bank Singer and Friedlander of London. He worked as a clerk and later moved to the arbitrage department. A fellow employee, Robert Meyer, suggested he apply at his father's brokerage house, F.M. Meyer of New York. F.M. Meyer. In 1956, Soros moved to New York City, where he worked as an arbitrage trader for F.M. Meyer. He specialized in European stocks, which were becoming popular with U.S. institutional investors following the formation of the coal and steel community, which later became the common market. Wertheim and Co. In 1959, after 3 years at F.M. Meyer, he moved to Wertheim and Company as an analyst of European securities, where he stayed until 1963. He planned to stay for 5 years, enough time to save $500,000, after which he intended to return to England to study philosophy. During this period, Soros developed the theory of reflexivity based on the ideas of his tutor at the London School of Economics, Karl Popper. Reflexivity posited that market values are often driven by the fallible ideas of participants, not only by the economic fundamentals of the situation. Reflexive feedback loops are created where ideas influence events and events influence ideas. Soros further argued that this leads to markets having pro-cyclical, virtuous or vicious, cycles of boom and bust, in contrast to the equilibrium predictions of more standard neoclassical economics. Arnhold and S. Bleichroeder. From 1963 to 1973, Soros' experience as a vice president at Arnhold and S. Bleichroeder resulted in little enthusiasm for the job. Business was slack following the introduction of the interest equalization tax, which undermined the viability of Soros' European trading. He spent the years from 1963 to 1966 with his main focus on the revision of his philosophy dissertation. In 1966 he started a fund with $100,000 of the firm's money to experiment with his trading strategies. But he was principally motivated by a desire to assert himself as an investor to profit from his reflexivity insights. In 1969 Soros set up the Double Eagle hedge fund, with $4 million of investors' capital including $250,000 of his own money. It was based in Curaçao, Dutch Antilles. In 1973 the Double Eagle Fund had $12 million and formed the basis of the Soros Fund. George Soros and Jim Rogers received returns on their share of capital and 20% of the profits each year. Soros Fund Management. In 1970, Soros founded Soros Fund Management and became its chairman. Among those who held senior positions there at various times were Jim Rogers, Stanley Druckenmiller, Mark Schwartz, Keith Anderson, and Soros' two sons. In 1973, due to perceived conflicts of interest limiting his ability to run the two funds, Soros resigned from the management of the Double Eagle Fund. He then established the Soros Fund, and gave investors in the Double Eagle Fund the option of transferring to that or staying with Arnhold and S. Bleichroeder. It was later renamed as the Quantum Fund, named after the physical theory of quantum mechanics. By that time the value of the fund had grown to $12 million, only a small proportion of which was Soros' own money. He and Jim Rogers reinvested their returns from the fund, and also a large part of their 20% performance fees, thereby expanding their stake. By 1981 the fund had grown to $400 million, and then a 22% loss in that year and substantial redemptions by some of the investors reduced it to $200 million. In July 2011 Soros announced that he had returned funds from outside investors' money and instead invested funds from his $24.5 billion family fortune, due to changes in U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission disclosure rules, which he felt would compromise his duties of confidentiality to his investors. The fund had at that time averaged over 20% per year compound returns. In 2013 the Quantum Fund made $5.5 billion, making it again the most successful hedge fund in history. Since its inception in 1973, the fund has generated $40 billion. The fund announced in 2015 that it would inject $300 million to help finance the expansion of Fen Hotels, an Argentine hotel company. The funds will develop 5,000 rooms over the next 3 years throughout various Latin American countries. 1992 pound short. Soros had been building a huge short position in pound sterling for months leading up to September 1992. Soros had recognized the unfavorable position of the United Kingdom in the European exchange rate mechanism. For Soros, the rate at which the United Kingdom was brought into the European exchange rate mechanism was too high. Their inflation was also much too high, and British interest rates were hurting their asset prices. By September 16, 1992, Black Wednesday, Soros Fund had sold short more than $10 billion in pounds, profiting from the UK government's reluctance to either raise its interest rates to levels comparable to those of other European exchange rate mechanism countries or float its currency. Finally, the UK withdrew from the European exchange rate mechanism, devaluing the pound. Soros' profit on the bet was estimated at over $1 billion. He was dubbed the man who broke the Bank of England. The estimated cost of Black Wednesday to the UK Treasury was £3.4 billion. On October 26, 1992, The Times quoted Soros as saying, "Our total position by Black Wednesday had to be worth almost $10 billion. We planned to sell more than that." In fact, when Norman Lamont said just before the devaluation that he would borrow nearly $15 billion to defend sterling, we were amused, because that was about how much we wanted to sell. Stanley Druckenmiller, who traded under Soros, originally saw the weakness in the pound and stated, Soros' contribution was pushing him to take a gigantic position. In 1997, during the Asian financial crisis, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Mahathir bin Mohamad, accused Soros of using the wealth under his control to punish the Association of Southeast Asian Nations for welcoming Myanmar as a member. Following on a history of anti-Semitic remarks, Mahathir made specific reference to Soros' Jewish background and implied Soros was orchestrating the crash as part of a larger Jewish conspiracy. 9 years later, in 2006, Mahathir met with Soros and afterwards stated that he accepted that Soros had not been responsible for the crisis. In 1998's The Crisis of Global Capitalism, Open Society Endangered, Soros explained his role in the crisis as follows: "The financial crisis that originated in Thailand in 1997 was particularly unnerving because of its scope and severity. By the beginning of 1997, it was clear to Soros Fund Management that the discrepancy between the trade account and the capital account was becoming untenable. We sold short the Thai baht and the Malaysian ringgit early in 1997 with maturities ranging from 6 months to a year. Subsequently, Prime Minister Mahathir of Malaysia accused me of causing the crisis, a wholly unfounded accusation. We were not sellers of the currency during or several months before the crisis. On the contrary, we were buyers when the currencies began to decline. We were purchasing ringgits to realize the profits on our earlier speculation. In 1999, economist Paul Krugman was critical of Soros' effect on financial markets. Nobody who has read a business magazine in the last few years can be unaware that these days there really are investors who not only move money in anticipation of a currency crisis, but actually do their best to trigger that crisis for fun and profit. These new actors on the scene do not yet have a standard name. My proposed term is Soros. In an interview regarding the late 2000s recession, Soros referred to it as the most serious crisis since the 1930s. According to Soros, market fundamentalism with its assumption that markets will correct themselves with no need for government intervention in financial affairs has been some kind of an ideological excess. In Soros' view, the market's moods, a mood of the markets being a prevailing bias or optimism/pessimism with which the markets look at reality, actually can reinforce themselves so that there are these initially self-reinforcing, but eventually unsustainable and self-defeating boom/bust sequences or bubbles. In reaction to the late 2000s recession, he founded the Institute for New Economic Thinking in October 2009. This is a think tank composed of international economic, business, and financial experts, mandated to investigate radical new approaches to organizing the international economic and financial system. Brought to you by WikiVidi documentaries. Would you like to know more?